Princess Daoki was born in 1912, at a time when her kingdom was already dying. Korea had fallen under Japanese rule, and the royal family lived inside palaces that no longer felt like homes. Every hallway echoed with silence. Every decision was watched. Every smile hid fear. She entered the world as a princess, but the throne she was meant to inherit had already been taken from her. Her father, Emperor Gojong, held her close as if she were the last spark of hope in a fading world. He walked with her through palace gardens that were no longer theirs. He whispered stories of the royal lineage, as if trying to preserve a history that the empire wanted erased. To him, Daokia was more than a daughter. She was the final reminder of Korean sovereignty. But the Japanese authorities knew this too. They monitored her constantly. A young princess represented identity, pride, and resistance. Even as a toddler, she was seen as a threat. She could never walk freely. She could never meet anyone without approval. Her education was controlled. Her movements were restricted. Her entire life was shaped by invisible chains. When Emperor Gojong died in 1919, the palace grew colder. Many Koreans believed his death was not natural. With him gone, Daoki lost her only protector. At 7 years old, she stood in the middle of a kingdom she could not save, surrounded by people who could not protect her. Her tragedy had only begun. As Daokia grew older, the Japanese colonial government tightened their grip. They understood the power she represented. She was not simply a girl, she was the last princess of Korea, a symbol that reminded people of the nation they had lost. And symbols had to be controlled. At 13, the authorities made a decision that shattered her childhood. They claimed she needed proper education, but their real intention was to remove her from her homeland. She was forcibly taken to Japan. There was no farewell ceremony, no embrace from loved ones. She left silently, escorted by officials who viewed her not as royalty, but as a political asset. In Tokyo, she entered a world where everything was foreign. She attended a girls' school where she was the only Korean student. Her classmates treated her with curiosity. Her teachers treated her with formality. No one treated her with warmth. She studied in a language she barely understood. She ate alone. She walked alone. She slept in a room that felt like a cell disguised as a dormitory. Desperate and lonely, she wrote letters to Korea, begging to return. None reached their destination. Every plea disappeared into a system designed to silence her. Slowly, the isolation broke her spirit. Her mental health began to suffer. She cried without reason. She forgot conversations. She stared out windows for hours, longing for a home she feared she would never see again. Doctors suggested she return to Korea for recovery. The authorities refused. A princess in Korea was a danger. A princess in isolation was safe. As Daokia entered adulthood, another blow arrived. The Japanese government arranged her marriage to Count So Takeyuki, a Japanese aristocrat. The marriage was not a choice. It was another method to erase her Korean identity. She became a wife in a land that never welcomed her. Surprisingly, life offered her a brief moment of peace. In 1932, she gave birth to her daughter, Masai. Holding her child, Daokia felt a flicker of joy that she had not felt since her father's death. She sang to her daughter. She held her tightly. She whispered stories about Korea, hoping that through these stories, a part of her homeland would live on. But happiness for Daokia was temporary. Years of trauma and isolation had damaged her deeply. Her mind began to crumble. She suffered episodes of confusion and deep depression. Some days she recognized her surroundings. Other days she wandered the streets aimlessly, lost in thoughts she could not control. Her condition worsened until she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. She was separated from her daughter, the one person who gave her purpose. Her letters became fractured and incoherent. She wrote to people long gone. She wrote to a palace that no longer existed. She wrote to a home she could not reach. Her life, once filled with royal titles and silk garments, had become a quiet tragedy inside hospital walls. The years inside the hospital were long and lonely. Japan fell after the Second World War. Korea regained independence. Dynasties ended. Empires collapsed. Nations rose again. But through all of this, Princess Deokia remained forgotten in a foreign land. Her family in Korea searched for records of her, believing she might have died. Meanwhile, Deokia lived in a room with white walls, staring at memories that no longer made sense. Nurses cared for her gently, but they could not reach the part of her that had been shattered. Doctors observed her, but they could not restore a lifetime of pain. Her daughter Masai, unable to deal with the emotional turmoil, eventually disappeared from public records. Many believe she died young. The loss of her daughter became another wound that Deokia carried silently, perhaps without fully understanding. Her identity faded. Her voice faded. Her memories faded. But her suffering never did. In 1962, a Korean journalist discovered her in a hospital, frail, thin, sitting alone. When they called her name, she did not respond at first. Her mind had been buried under decades of sorrow. Slowly, recognition appeared. After more than 40 years in exile, the last princess of Korea was finally returning home. But the Korea she returned to was not the Korea she remembered. The palaces had changed. The people had changed. The world had changed. And she had changed most of all. She walked slowly through Deoksugung Palace, touching walls she once knew as a child. Some days she wept softly, some days she smiled faintly, some days she sat quietly, watching the gardens where she once played, as if trying to bring back memories lost to time. Her final years were peaceful but silent. She lived in a nursing facility, surrounded by caretakers who treated her with compassion. She spoke little, she wrote little. Her life became a fading whisper. Princess Deokia died in 1989. She left behind a story not of glory, but of heartbreak. A story of a princess who lost her family, her kingdom, her identity, and her freedom. A princess whose life reflected the suffering of her people. A princess the world must never forget.